The car came to rest on an empty road where help almost never passes. Inside, a man was trapped between bent metal and fading breath. Then he saw the seats beside him and realized they were still. And just outside the wreck, a dog stood watching. It didn't bark, it didn't panic, it didn't run for comfort. It stepped into the middle of the road like it was on duty, blocking the lane, waiting for headlights that might never come. And when a truck finally slowed, the dog didn't move. Before we start, please subscribe. When we hit 100,000 subscribers, I'll be buying a dog I truly admire, a Tibetan Mastiff. Let me know in the comment. Do I have bad taste, or is that a solid choice? The day had begun like so many others, unremarkable in the way that made it feel safe. The man drove with both hands resting lightly on the wheel, the road stretching out ahead of them in long, familiar lines. His wife sat beside him, one elbow against the door, fingers tapping softly to a song playing low on the radio. In the back seat, the children leaned close to each other, arguing over something small and ordinary, the kind of argument that never lasts more than a few minutes before turning into laughter. They were not in a hurry. There was no reason to be. The trip had been planned without urgency, a simple drive meant to end at home, where dinner waited and the evening would dissolve into its usual rhythm. Outside the windows, the land passed quietly, trees blurring together, sky wide and pale above them. Nothing about the road suggested danger. Nothing warned them to slow down or turn back. But later, when he tried to replay the day, one thought would keep returning with a strange, cold clarity. This was the kind of road where help did not pass often, where silence could stretch longer than it should, and where a mistake could stay unseen for too long. At a stoplight earlier, the man had glanced at his wife and smiled, the kind of smile that didn't need words. She had smiled back, her hand finding his arm for just a moment before returning to her lap. The children had gone quiet then, pressed against the glass, watching something outside that only mattered for a second before disappearing again. Later, the road grew emptier. Fewer cars passed them. The radio signal weakened, fading in and out until the music became background noise instead of something to follow. The man adjusted the volume once, then left it alone. He liked the sound of his family filling the space more than any song. The sky shifted slowly, clouds gathering without drama, light dimming in a way that felt natural, like evening arriving a little earlier than expected. His wife commented on it casually, wondering aloud if it might rain later. He nodded, eyes still on the road, already thinking about nothing in particular. The children had grown quiet again, not arguing this time, just tired. One rested their head against the seat, eyes half closed. The other stared forward, chin tucked down, lost in thought. The man felt a brief swell of contentment at the sight, the simple fullness of everyone being there together, contained within the small, moving space of the car. He didn't see the moment when everything changed. There was no warning he remembered, no sharp sound that stood out in his mind. What came instead was a strange slipping sensation, like falling asleep too fast, like a thought breaking apart before it finished forming. And in the middle of that slipping, there was one clear, physical interruption, the steering wheel stiffening under his hands for a fraction of a second, as if the car itself had decided it no longer belonged to him. The world blurred at the edges, sound stretching thin, light bending into something unfamiliar. And then, in that narrowing space between awareness and nothing, his mind reached backward. It reached for his family. Images returned without order or logic. His wife's hand on his arm, the children's laughter, the steady motion of the road, the sense of safety that had wrapped around them without anyone noticing. The moments replayed themselves softly, insistently, as if his mind believed that holding onto them could keep everything exactly where it was. He felt warm, then cold, weightless, then impossibly heavy. The road, the car, the world itself seemed to drift away, replaced by the echo of voices that no longer had bodies, the impression of movement without direction. His thoughts slowed, stretched thin, and finally began to settle into something quieter. Somewhere beyond that quiet, far outside the memory his mind was clinging to, the car had come to rest on the side of an empty road. And something else had stopped there too. In the narrowing space of his fading awareness, the road did not look broken. The car did not feel crushed. His mind would not allow it. Instead, it carried him gently backward into what felt whole. He saw the house first. The front door opening, the familiar creak in the hinge he always meant to fix, the smell of something warm waiting in the kitchen, his wife moving ahead of him, keys set down on the table, her voice drifting down the hallway as she called the children inside. In this version of the world, nothing had shattered. Nothing had been taken. The day had ended exactly the way it was meant to. He followed them through the house slowly, watching details his mind suddenly treated like treasure. The scuffed mark near the stairs. The crooked picture frame they always forgot to straighten. The way one child dropped their shoes near the door and pretended not to hear when told to pick them up. He let himself notice all of it, because noticing felt like keeping. He felt himself smile. The children ran past him, their footsteps light and unbothered. His wife turned in the kitchen doorway and gave him that same look from the car, the one that meant everything was ordinary and everything was safe. "You're quiet," she said in this soft, constructed memory. He shrugged, stepping toward her, "Just tired." She reached out and brushed something from his sleeve, though there was nothing there. He leaned into the touch without thinking. The world inside his mind was steady. No glass, no twisted metal, no smell of fuel, no weight pressing against his chest. Dinner unfolded in slow detail. Plates set down, water poured, the children talking over each other about small things that did not matter. He listened to every word as if he had never heard them before. He noticed the shape of their hands, the rhythm of their breathing, the way his wife tucked her hair behind her ear when she concentrated. The light in the house dimmed gradually, evening settling in. Outside the windows, darkness gathered, but it did not feel threatening here. It felt normal. He rose from the table and walked into the hallway. The children passed him again, heading toward their rooms. One of them paused and wrapped their arms around his waist suddenly, for no reason except instinct. He felt the small weight of it and held on a second longer than usual. "Good night," the child said. "Good night," he answered. His wife stood at the far end of the hallway, watching them disappear into their rooms. She looked tired in a gentle way, the kind that comes from long days filled with ordinary responsibilities. "We made it home," she said quietly. The sentence echoed in him strangely. "We made it home." He nodded, but something inside him tightened just slightly. The house felt complete but distant, like it was being viewed through water. The edges of everything began to blur again. The sound of the children's doors closing stretched too long, becoming something else entirely. A sharp sensation pressed into his ribs. Not in the memory. In reality. The warmth of the house began to cool. The smell of dinner thinned into something harsher. The floor beneath his feet lost its firmness and tilted sideways. His wife's face remained in front of him, but it grew pale, quieter, as if she were stepping back into fog. "Stay," he tried to say, though he wasn't sure to whom. The hallway darkened. The house folded in on itself. The last thing he felt inside the dream was his wife's hand slipping from his arm. Not suddenly, not violently, just gradually, like fingers sliding away when sleep takes over. Then there was no house. No hallway. No voices. Only the weight of his own body pressed against something hard, and the faint, unfamiliar sound of breathing that was not his own. The house vanished completely. Cold rushed in where warmth had been. The smell of dinner turned into the sharp scent of fuel and wet asphalt. The hallway walls dissolved into open air, and the quiet of night pressed down on him like weight. He tried to breathe and felt something resist him. His eyes opened, but only halfway. The world tilted at an angle that made no sense. Metal surrounded him, bent and unfamiliar. One of the doors hung wrong. The windshield was gone. The steering wheel pressed against his chest. For a moment, he did not remember why. Then sound returned. Not voices. Not sirens. Just wind brushing through broken glass. He tried to turn his head, but the movement sent pain through him like lightning. His throat felt thick. He tried to call out, but only a shallow sound escaped. The road was quiet. Too quiet. It wasn't a busy highway. There were no passing headlights, no steady stream of traffic. Just a narrow stretch of asphalt cutting through open land, the kind of road people used when they were in a hurry and thought nothing could happen there. His memory flickered. Rain earlier. A sudden blur. Headlights where they shouldn't have been. Impact. Then nothing. He forced his eyes wider. The passenger seat. Empty. The back seat. Still. He tried again to move, but his body did not respond the way it used to. Panic rose slowly, heavy and disbelieving, as if even fear did not want to fully wake him yet. And then he saw movement. Not from the car. From outside it. A shape near the edge of the road, low and steady. A dog. It stood a few feet away from the wreckage, not pacing, not panicking. It did not approach the car the way most dogs would, no frantic barking, no desperate circling. It watched him. Its fur was dark against the fading light. Its posture was alert but controlled. When their eyes met, the dog did not flinch. It had seen him. He tried to lift his hand, but it barely twitched. The dog stepped closer to the car then, careful over the scattered glass. It stopped near the driver's door, sniffed once, and lifted its head toward his face. For a second, he thought it would lick the blood on his forehead, the way frightened animals sometimes do. It didn't. It studied him. Then it turned away. The dog moved toward the center of the road, paws steady on the asphalt. It stopped there and stood tall, directly in the middle of the lane. Waiting. The man's vision blurred again, but he kept his eyes open just enough to see the silhouette against the dim horizon. The dog did not leave. Minutes stretched. The wind picked up. He felt himself slipping again, consciousness pulling him downward. And then, headlights. Far off at first, just a glow. The dog remained where it stood. The truck approaching slowed, its engine sound lowering. The headlights grew brighter, reflecting off the wrecked car's twisted metal. The dog did not run. It held its ground. The truck braked hard, stopping a short distance away. A door opened. A man stepped out, confusion in his posture at first, then concern as he saw the wreckage beyond the dog. The dog turned immediately and ran toward the ditch, then stopped and looked back, making sure the driver followed. It was not random movement. It was direction. The truck driver hurried forward, eyes widening as he reached the car. He leaned in through the broken window frame and saw him. "Hey, can you hear me?" the man shouted, already reaching for his phone. The injured man tried to respond, but everything was fading again. Through the narrowing tunnel of his vision, he saw the dog return to the side of the car. It did not climb inside. It did not panic. It simply stood there, watching, waiting. The sound of a voice calling for emergency services blurred into the wind. The truck driver's words faded in and out. The injured man felt hands near him, but not yet lifting him. Sirens began in the distance. And just before he lost consciousness again, he saw the dog sit down beside the car, eyes fixed on him, refusing to leave. Not out of fear, out of decision. The next time he opened his eyes, the world was white. Not the soft white of the house from before, but a sharper one, ceiling lights, walls that smelled like disinfectant, a steady, mechanical sound rising and falling beside him. His body felt distant, heavy, as if it belonged to someone else. He tried to move his hand and felt resistance, not pain exactly, but warning. Tubes, bandages, weight pressed gently into his chest. Voices drifted in and out. Explained words, reassuring words, words meant for someone waking up in pieces. You're in the hospital. You were in an accident. You're safe now. The last phrase did not settle him. He turned his head slightly, heart beginning to race as memory tried to reconnect. The road, the silence, the empty seats. And then he saw the dog. It was lying on the floor beside the bed, curled but alert, head resting on its paws, eyes open. It lifted its head the moment he moved, ears angling forward, body tensing before easing again when it realized he was awake. For a second, he wondered if his mind had made it up again. But the nurse followed his gaze and smiled. "You mean him," she said quietly. "He wouldn't leave." The dog stood and stepped closer to the bed, stopping just short of touching it, the way it had on the road. Its tail moved once, slow and controlled. "They tried to take him to animal control," the nurse continued. "He refused, sat in the hallway and wouldn't move, wouldn't eat either unless he could see you." She paused, then added more simply, "He rode in the ambulance with you, laid right here the whole time." The man swallowed, throat dry. He closed his eyes briefly, the weight of it pressing in. He had not imagined the dog. It had not wandered off once help arrived. It had stayed, choosing him even when it would have been easier to disappear. The days blurred together after that. Pain came and went in controlled waves. Doctors explained fractures, internal bruising, injuries that would heal slowly. The room changed with shifts. Night replaced day and then reversed again. The dog stayed through all of it. It learned the sounds of the hospital quickly. The carts, the alarms, the footsteps that meant someone was about to enter. It never barked. It never growled. It positioned itself where it could see both the door and the bed, body angled protectively without being in the way. The nurses noticed. One of them started bringing extra food, setting it down beside the dog after checking the room. She didn't ask permission. She didn't need to. "He eats what you eat," she said once, smiling softly as she placed a tray down. "So I guess you're sharing." The dog accepted the food carefully, always glancing back at the man before lowering its head, as if checking whether it was allowed to stay. Physical therapy began. The man learned how much strength he had lost. The dog adjusted with him, rising only when he rose, settling only when he rested. When he struggled to reach something dropped near the bed, the dog stepped forward and nudged it closer with its nose, once even lifting it gently with its teeth. No one had trained it to do that. Or maybe someone had long ago. One afternoon, a doctor paused near the doorway longer than usual, watching the scene in front of him. "That dog," he said slowly, "he's different." The man looked down at the dog, who was resting its head lightly against the bed frame now, eyes half closed but aware. "He found me," the man said, "on the road." The doctor nodded once. "Looks like he decided something that night." The man stayed in the hospital for days that felt longer than weeks. The pain eased, the fog lifted, reality settled in. His family was gone. That truth did not arrive all at once. It came in pieces, in silences, in the way conversations stopped just before the subject reached him. The dog was there when it finally did. It did not react when the man's breathing changed, when his hands shook, when tears came without warning. It simply pressed closer, steady and solid, grounding him in the present when the past tried to pull him apart. When the discharge papers were finally signed, there was a pause. "And the dog?" someone asked. The man looked down. The dog looked up. "He's coming with me," he said, and this time there was no hesitation in his voice. The dog stood immediately, tail moving once, already ready, as if it had never doubted the answer. Home did not feel like home when he first stepped into it again. The door opened the same way it always had, the hinges giving that familiar sound, but everything beyond it felt hollow, like the house had forgotten how many people it was built to hold. The rooms were too quiet. The air felt untouched. His body moved carefully now, each step measured, his balance not yet fully his own. The dog paused at the doorway. Not because it was unsure, but because it was reading the space the way it read everything. It took in the silence, the stillness, the absence. Then it stepped inside and stopped close to him, shoulder aligned with his leg, close enough to steady without pressing. They learned the house together. The dog followed him from room to room, not curious in a playful way, but attentive, as if mapping where he might need help later. When something slipped from his hand, the dog noticed before frustration could rise, lifting it gently and setting it near his foot. When he moved too fast and had to stop, the dog stopped with him. At night, when sleep came in pieces, the dog stayed awake longer than necessary, positioned near the bed, listening to sounds that never came. When the man startled awake from dreams he didn't remember fully, the dog lifted its head and stayed still, letting presence do the work words could not. Days passed. Then weeks. The man grew stronger slowly. He learned how to walk without thinking about every step, how to move without wincing, how to breathe again without bracing for pain. The dog adjusted at every stage, stepping back when help was no longer needed, stepping in again when it was. One afternoon, paperwork arrived. A letter from the hospital, a follow-up call from a department he didn't recognize at first, questions about the dog, where it had come from, whether anyone had claimed it. No one had. The dog had no chip, no collar, no record anyone could find. It was as if it had arrived on that road simply to do what it did and then stayed. The man signed the forms without ceremony. Ownership transferred. A name asked for. He didn't choose it right away. Some things deserved time. It was weeks later, standing in the yard at dusk, the dog sitting beside him, watching the trees sway in the low light, that the name came naturally. Not because it sounded strong or meaningful or poetic, but because it fit the way the dog had moved through his life without force. Anchor, he said softly. The dog looked at him. Just once. Then settled again, as if that was all it needed. Life did not become easy after that. It became manageable. There were days when grief returned without warning, heavy and sharp, and days when the quiet felt louder than any noise ever had. But the dog remained, not as a replacement for what was lost, but as something that made standing up again possible. Neighbors noticed eventually. The way the dog stayed close, the way it waited at corners, the way it seemed to anticipate things before they happened. Someone asked once if the dog had training. Maybe, the man said, but not the kind that fades. The dog did not seek attention from strangers. It chose its circle carefully. It trusted few and deeply. With him, it was constant. Some evenings, the man would sit on the porch, watching the road that led away from the house, the same kind of road that had taken everything, and then, unexpectedly, given something back. The dog would lie at his feet, breathing steady, body relaxed in a way it never had been on the roadside. They did not talk about the accident. They did not need to. What mattered was this. When everything stopped, when the world narrowed to pain and silence, something stayed. And in the space left behind by loss, a dog had made room for a family to exist again. Not the one he had before, but one that knew how to stay.